Hello, everyone. My name is Ross, Teacher Toolkit. Thank you for joining me this evening. I am your host. You should have either found this live stream via my Teacher Toolkit accounts or through an eTeach registration page, just to make sure that you're in the right place. Our focus tonight is to debunk some of the top myths about teaching abroad. And we've actually got 5 myths to discuss. I'm going to be joined by a couple of people. I'll introduce them shortly. And we want to unpick whether you're an early career teacher looking for your first role overseas or looking for a leadership role, whatever it might be. This session is going to give you the truth about working overseas while sharing some practical tips on how to get started from a teacher perspective, my own experiences, as well as what we can see through recruitment processes too. So in the video here, if I just put the screen up here, we'll be kind of playing around with some of the technology here. I'll be revealing some of these different questions and myths and comments like this you can see on the screen. But just to make sure you're familiar with the technology, could you just tell me where you're watching from first of all? So just say hello in the comment box that hopefully you can see on your device, and let us know where you're watching from, and I'll give your town, city, village, whatever it might be, a quick shout out. So let's just get everyone saying hello. So I'm just going to say hello to Frank. I was on Frank's podcast not so long ago. Nice to see you, Frank. Frank's a former school inspector and school leader here in England. And I know people are watching from all over the place. So let's just see. We've got Rainy watching from Nigeria. Fantastic. I did teach in Kano a long time ago in North Nigeria. Karen in Canada. Okay, fantastic. There are 2 teachers watching there. Excellent. We've got Liam from Leicester. Good evening, Liam. Charlotte from Leeds. Let's see from where else we're going internationally. Susan in Kenya. Fantastic. Keep going, everyone. I'm going to spend another 20 seconds. Sabrina in Birmingham. Just to get your connections, make sure you know where you're going to leave comments. We're going to answer as many questions as you can. Tabia from Sheffield. Ghazala from India. Fantastic. Ghana, a real international audience. Fantastic. Monica from London, thank you for joining us. So last chance, everyone, before I'm going to bring in Reese, first of all, who's representing eTeach. And then I'm going to bring in Amy, who's going to talk to you about her experiences and insights about working overseas. South Africa. And hello, Ben. I know Ben watching in Cyprus. Thanks for joining us, Ben. Namibia. Look at this. Just people from everywhere. Fantastic. Right. Enough of that for now. And I'll pop back to 1 or 2 other places. There's a quick shout out to Cockermouth in Cumbria. Thank you, Rosie, for joining us. I'm going to bring in Reese. So let's get rid of this title screen here. Hi, Reese. How are you? Could you introduce yourself to everyone and tell everyone what you used to do as a teacher and what you now do with eTeach?
Yeah, hi, Ross. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I mean, we're on multiple time zones, but here in England, it is 7 p.m. So those in the UK, thank you for giving up a bit of your evening to find out a bit more about international teaching. So my role is Managing Director of eTeach, and we are a global recruitment provider for schools, specializing in online advertising and digital recruitment, but also specialist headhunting consultancy services for schools all around the world. We do a lot in the UK, but increasingly more and more in regions such as the Middle East, Europe, and Asia mainly, but have done placements in some of the most obscure destinations around the world, showing our sort of reach and the schools that we sort of work with all over the world. So yeah, our specialism, as I said, is advertising, online recruitment, as well as recruitment technology for schools, which really gives us a unique insight into what schools are looking for, partly, but also candidate preferences and how candidates can engage best with schools and secure their roles all over the world, really.
And what we're going to do with Reese, I'm going to introduce Amy shortly. We're going to go through 5 myths. So these are the kind of myths that Reese and I have come up with. So let me just whet your appetite. First one's about international teaching. Is it only for experienced teachers? That's the first myth we're going to address. Second one of the evening is you cannot advance your career or bring your qualifications back to your home location. Third myth is relocating will be hard and expensive, and we'll talk about all the permutations, whether you're working on your own or you're taking your family overseas. Myth number 4, is it seasonal and permanent? And we probably talk about some contract headaches there as well. And then the final myth is, will it make you isolated? You know, all those kind of well-being and mental health conversations that we need to have. So that's what's to come. But let me bring in Amy. Reese, I'll bring you back in a moment if that's okay.
Great.
Amy, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Ross, and hi, everybody.
Where are you tuning in from tonight, Amy? And could you introduce?
I am tuning in from Dubai, so it is 11:10 in the evening here.
Right. A big brownie point for you for tuning in so late at night. Well done. Could you give us a little flavour of your career to date and what you currently do, Amy?
Yes, so I've been based in Dubai for 5 years, and prior to living in Dubai, I was living in Prague, and prior to living in Prague, I was living in Australia. I have been doing international recruitment since I lived in Prague, so for about 7 years, and I recruit for, as Reese was saying, the international schools across the Middle East, Southeast Asia and Europe, and other locations as well. So we're not restricted to where we recruit for. You know, we love to help as many schools and as many teachers as we can. A lot of British international schools, but also some American, some IB schools as well, some with their own international curriculum also.
Sure.
So yeah, bringing teachers to Dubai as well as other countries as well.
Great, and we'll talk about all those far-flung destinations that you do also, and you know, those obscure places that we wouldn't necessarily think about. So here's our slide deck. I'm going to bring Reese back in here. This is the first myth that we'd like to talk about. Now, before we get into the business end of things, just a reminder to everybody watching, please put your comments in the chat box. There's a good 500 plus watching the live stream on YouTube, and then this is also being broadcast to Facebook, LinkedIn, and to my Twitter channel. So there's going to be quite a few thousand people watching this live. So comments come through. I've got some, the wonderful Bex, who's hiding behind the scenes from eTeach, who's going to filter through some comments and then signpost them to me to flag up on the screen, and I'll just bump up these comments and questions on your behalf, and Reese, Amy, and I will do our best to address those questions. So I'm going to hide this slide deck. I'm going to press another button here. We might have this fancy display. Well, that's a bit too close. Let's do that one instead. And let's talk about this first myth. International teaching is only for experienced teachers. So, Amy, what's your first response to this myth?
Absolutely not. There's so many ECTs that we place abroad, and the support that they can get is unbelievable. And
Reese, your first reaction?
Yeah, it's definitely a misconception that is probably perpetuated by, you know, schools are obviously looking for great educators, and they're looking, the bonus for them is someone with lots of experience, and yeah, they would love candidates like that. But the reality is there are opportunities for teachers of all stages of their career, and there's even a subsector of schools, British schools out there, that are recognized by the DFE and the British government to be able to hold and conduct ECT induction periods. So enabling a candidate to go straight from university, begin their induction process in an international setting, do their 2 years induction, and get their QTS awarded finally at the end of that, right for out of university. So it's a real opportunity for young teachers as well as experienced teachers, definitely.
And I guess from my experiences, so I did a brief spell teaching in Nigeria when I was a very new teacher. But in my life as a teacher trainer, I've probably about 17 countries now I think I've been to, thinking about all sorts of destinations from Canada to Malaysia to Cyprus to Belarus and all sorts of places. I've met all shapes and sizes, ages of teachers in lots of different contexts in teaching. I've got this interesting comment from Karen. I'm just going to display to you here. Let's take the other aspect of, whether you're inexperienced and new to the profession. What about someone like Karen, who she says her colleague here and herself are in their 60s? Are you familiar with any age restrictions on specific countries, or is that another myth?
So there are in certain countries, but there have been situations where the visas have been approved. So I think like Middle East, for example, would be more difficult in the Middle East, but there have been visas approved for teachers over the age of 60. I think it's becoming easier, which is definitely promising.
Mm-hmm. I would also, we've got an international teacher recruitment crisis. Of course, you have certain, parameters. You've got retirement and things like that to consider, and certain governments have different rules for kind of certain ages of working and things like that. But I view teaching as a point of strength, where there's always going to be schools somewhere, even in your own country and internationally, always looking for some great teachers. So I'm hopefully, Karen, that reassures you with your comments there. I've got a quick comment here about ECTs traveling to Malaysia. Reese, you talked about the QTS issue and getting qualified before you head over overseas. Any thoughts on this comment from AL?
Yeah, so in Malaysia specifically, there are 2 British schools that are what is called BSO, British Schools Overseas, and they're accredited and have the ability to do ECT inductions. And those are Marlborough College International in Malaysia and Charterhouse International School. So those 2 are where, if you're an ECT and looking at Malaysia, that would be a great place to start. But the other element to touch on around graduate teachers is that, again, in order to do your induction and get QTS, which then obviously puts you, your qualifications and your sort of level and experience are then reflected back home in terms of the same scale and the same measure in a way. But you can still get a job as a graduate in any school, technically. If the school are willing to take a graduate on, I would make sure that they have the right support systems in place to support you as a young teacher. But you just need to be conscious, if you're a British graduate and you want to obviously return to the UK at some point, you will need to complete your QTS or your induction period at some point. But you can still get a job as a graduate wherever, as long as the school are willing to hire a young teacher.
In fact, on that note, I work with a particular university here in the UK that supports new teachers to achieve their QTS while they work in their school internationally. So that's something else for people to consider. Amy, I'm going to throw this comment your way. What opportunities are there for teaching assistants and higher level teaching assistants who have years of experience, but not necessarily the qualifications that are educated related?
So it has been difficult with TA roles for myself, for example, for direct recruitment, because with specialising in the Middle East, obviously for teaching roles, they provide the tax-free salary, the accommodation allowance, the flights, the annual flights, the visa, the medical insurance, everything. But for the teaching assistant roles, they don't tend to get that international package. Right. So it's not very attractive for the teaching assistants to move abroad. If they're already in the country and on a spouse visa, then brilliant, because they don't need to worry about getting their flights paid for or getting the visa. But in the Middle East, it can be difficult because they wouldn't really want to move when you can't get the package. If that makes sense.
Are there any countries doing a good example of recruiting TAs and HLTAs that maybe offer packages? Are you familiar with anyone that's doing that really well?
Not really, not that I'm aware of, to be honest.
Okay, so that's something to consider, Fazila. I hope that helps. Reese, here's another one, and we're going to move on to our second myth shortly. I'm a non-native English speaker, teaching experience abroad, and now on the skit. So for people watching, this is a school-centered initial teacher training course. Is there a chance for a non-native entity to teach in an international school? That's from Melina.
Yeah, great question and an interesting scenario. But in if you are getting a British qualification via your SCIT, and you will be a qualified teacher or newly qualified teacher, there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't go and teach in an international school that can do an induction process. Whether you're a non-native English speaker or not, obviously the level of your English would need to be at a certain level for the school to accept to teach the subject in obviously English as well. Majority of the schools that we work with are English medium schools primarily. So sort of fluency is a important part of it, but just because you're non-native doesn't mean you have any less opportunity than a native English speaker in that sense.
Great. And just to clarify, because I appreciate we've got a global audience, there's going to be lots of acronyms popping through. So ECT in England stands for Early Career Teacher. It used to be NQT, Newly Qualified Teacher. And the word SCIT there on the screen stands for School Centred Initial Teacher Training. So you're based in your school, learning how to teach as we go. Right, we're going to move on. Unless you have any other objections, Rhys and Amy, or any other last thoughts, we'll move on to myth number 2. So myth number 2, if I fathom out the technology here, is I can't advance my career abroad or bring my qualifications back home to the UK. So Amy, what's your first response to this myth?
The progression opportunities internationally is just insane what teachers can do, and it's like Rhys was mentioning earlier, that the schools that are accredited British schools overseas, for example, they provide ECTs with their induction, so it's valid back in the UK. So people absolutely can take their qualifications back to the UK and their experience.
So that's good to hear. Easily busted. Rhys, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's echoing what Amy said, really. I mean, you kind of have to think of international schools as businesses in a sense, and their product that they sell, because they are private schools and they charge fees, is quality education. And obviously, if it's a British school, it's a quality British education, but the same for an American, Australian curriculum IB. So to deliver that quality education, they want to have the best teachers and the best developed teachers. So these schools invest a lot in CPD, or continuous professional development, for their staff. So that sort of skill development piece is absolutely there in the international space. The other side of it is, by its nature, international schools and international teaching it's quite transient. You know, teachers move a lot. They stay for often contracts are about 2 years is quite common, but teachers will stay maybe 2 to 3, 4 years, and they'll look for another international posting. And, you know, often you'll move up the career ladder by doing this, but that creates a lot of opportunity within schools as well for teachers to, you know, step into more seniority if there's lots of sort of movement around the school. So there's opportunity to advance the career, absolutely. And taking those qualifications back home, more and more, that is being recognized as, you know, really great experience, because the diversity of experience, the ability to experience multiple cultures is massively important, particularly here in the UK, but I know elsewhere around the world, where the world is sort of shrinking and the cultures are sort of colliding in all sorts of different societies. So having that experience of teaching multiple different cultures, different locations, and being almost more worldly, I think is becoming much more highly regarded coming back to places like the UK or anywhere. When you return back to your country of origin, you really do start to bring some serious skills and maybe fresh perspectives. I think if I can add one more bit to that as well. Sorry, I'm very passionate about that sort of thing. But those international schools, like I said, businesses, you know, they can be really innovative. They can be quite at the forefront of education, pedagogy, really looking to do the most modern practices when it comes to teaching. So often some of the experiences you can get abroad are possibly even further ahead than what you could have in country of origin, because they are all about pushing the boundaries of what education can be and how high a quality it can be.
Thank you, Reese, for your passion, and I'm gonna tap into that a lot more now. I've been reading lots of comments, and I've also been thinking while you've both been speaking about. I'm just going to put my site on for a moment. This is a map. Now I try to tag all the places I go on my travels, and I know Ben's watching. So I first met Ben teaching in Germany, head teacher of a primary school. He now works in a school in Cyprus, in the British Forces School. If I think about some other colleagues that I've known on my travels who've moved over as a teacher or a middle leader and have advanced into headship in my life doing this teacher training for the last 8 years, I've seen many people, again, new teachers, experienced teachers, move into different locations around the world, having their entire career in some respects on the international circuit, and equally some people coming home. So this myth we've got here at the bottom of the screen, I cannot advance my career. It's nice to just go through and clarify. There's, I guess, lots of opportunities for people. So we hope we're going to signpost some ideas and solutions for you. So back to you, Amy. I've got a question here where we might be able to help. Tiago, I've got QTS, 10 years experience, working in a school in Angola, and he wants to return to international school, but with no success. Have you got any things for him to consider that you may not have thought about?
I suppose it does depend on when you're applying, because if you're applying now for vacancies that are open for August 2025, it's quite common to not have success yet because it's very early and the vacancies do come up, but the schools also have January vacancies, so they're kind of jumping on the January vacancies. And I think teachers do lose faith at this point, because they might start applying now and not hearing back. They think, what's wrong with me? Why am I not hearing back? And so many teachers come to me panicking, and even January they still haven't found anything. And I say, honestly, it's not because it's you, it's because this is quite normal and the recruitment process hasn't actually necessarily properly started. So it really does depend. If you're applying now for August, then the likelihood is because they're just not ready to fully do the recruitment process yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very good point. Reese?
I probably can't add much more than that to Amy. If I think about it's a really interesting market and industry in that the schools only now will be gathering their commitments from their existing staff as to will you be staying with us until next year, and exactly what Amy's saying. So when it comes to applying and looking for the jobs, there will be a big flurry of job postings over the next month. Yeah. Okay,
so I hope that helps, Tiago. Let us know if you've got any other comments in the chat box, please. So here's the myth we're trying to dispel. I cannot advance my career or bring qualifications back to the UK. I found a couple of other quick comments, which I think there'll be some context in certain countries, but what about changing subjects when you move abroad? Obviously, there'll be some countries that will demand certain qualifications, but what are your experiences here, Amy, with this question?
So with teaching different subjects, obviously the schools, the international schools are so much bigger than, for example, if you're coming from the UK, they're so much bigger than the UK. They can often be like 4 to 6 form entry. There's so many students, there's so many teachers, and also they don't really have supply teaching like they do in the UK. They might have some, but it's not as common as the UK.
Right.
Therefore, if, for example, if you're a history teacher and you can also teach business studies, and you accept a history teaching job, and you want to teach some business studies, it's quite likely that you would be able to get that on your timetable, because they'd love for you to be able to help. And also, if you do have that ability to teach another subject, then brilliant. Like I said, the schools are so big and they need that help. But the one thing with moving to the Middle East is you really do need a bachelor's degree in the subject that you're teaching, really. So if you were going for a history teaching job and you've got if you really were passionate about teaching business studies, but you've got a bachelor's degree in history and you teach history and you enjoy that as well, you would go for a history teaching role, and you could also combine it with business studies. So there's that.
Yeah,
those options as
my
well.
life as an assistant deputy head teacher was, someone's got the qualification to teach a certain subject, but they've got a strong interest in a second subject, then that's a potential switch for the future should the school need it. Reese, let me bring you in for some comments here. P. Flynn here in the chat box, can I change subject teaching abroad? So they've specified history to PE. So obviously, quite a change of subject. What would be your thoughts here?
I guess, I mean, Amy answered it fantastically. I think the way most or a lot of countries do their immigration process is, your qualification or the subject you're coming to teach needs to match your qualification. So there's kind of, to get into a role, you will need to be there to teach that subject. But as you get into the school and as you again grow, develop, and get to know the school, I'm sure there are great opportunities to diversify your teaching, move into other subjects, etc. But what I would say to Mr. or Mrs. Flynn, I'm not sure who they are, but the history to PE is an interesting choice. Obviously, both great subjects, but from a supply and demand maybe perspective, history is quite in demand. You would be quite a popular popular candidate
once you're there, probably.
PE is heavily saturated. There's a lot of PE teachers. They're looking to teach everywhere. So you may, if you want to sort of change subject, you might find yourself up against a lot of competition in the PE world. But actually, from a history perspective,
let me on this myth. Let me just put it back on stream. I'll take another couple of questions I can see in the chat box. Cannot advance my career. So there's lots of idiosyncrasies, subject specific, those kind of things. So here's something else I've spotted from Lucalo. Do I have to do QTS even if I have NQF level 9, so national qualification in a master's in maths from South Africa? Any advice on that, Reese?
So no, not necessarily. It all, again, visa and immigration laws are obviously very strict when it comes in certain countries. They differ country to country as well. So it all depends on what the sort of local visa laws that are around teachers joining, and often there is a minimum qualification requirement.
I guess a tip for Lucala is to look at the country that he wants to apply to and see what the rules would be.
And a lot of courses, a lot of qualifications can be equated, so they can be compared. There are some online tools to do this where you can check does your qualification basically equal the same as to what QTS is in a way. I think it was UK NARIC used to have one.
Okay, Amy, I'm going to bring you back in. I'm going to throw this question to you from Monica about early years teaching. Is there some demand for early years teachers abroad? I am going to say yes, but what would you say?
Yes, I love this question. We need more early years teachers. There
you go, Monica.
Yes. So there's a lot of primary teachers, I'm not going to lie. When a primary vacancy comes through, it's a bit like Reese was saying about PE. There's a lot of Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, but the early years teachers we need more of. So fantastic choice.
There you go. Right. Thank you, Amy. I'll just put you behind the scenes for a second, if that's okay. Right. So let's pop to myth number 3. Keep your answers coming in the chat box. Good luck, Monica, finding your next role. So relocating abroad, is it expensive? And how, when we talk about hard, let's talk about some of the, emotional and physical demands of relocating to another part of the world. So it could be the entire other side of the world. So let's just get Reese and Amy both back in just for some general comments about this myth. How hard is it? What stories are you hearing?
So speaking from personal experience, because obviously I've moved abroad 3 times, I might have different views to other people, because I do see, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups and a lot of expat Facebook groups, especially Brits in Dubai and things like this. And I do see a lot of comments of people asking, not just teachers, but anybody, you know, I've got X amount of savings, is this enough to move to Dubai? And people think that Dubai is expensive. I honestly really don't. I actually think it's cheaper to live here than the UK. And I came with nothing. So I didn't, I started to earn properly once I lived in Dubai. And I actually, the only thing that I needed to do before I moved here was put the deposit down on the apartment, but teachers don't need to do that because the schools pay for the accommodation. So in my opinion, no, I don't find it expensive at all. I don't think that you need a lot of savings to come abroad, because I didn't, and it was absolutely.
How did that compare, Amy, when you moved to Prague or Australia?
When I moved to Australia, I had to prove that I had access to £3,000, which was a bit random. But I didn't have to have that in my own account. And again, I just went traveling and got a job when I lived there, and the same with Prague, really.
Okay. And Reese, what are your initial thoughts to this?
I think there's a lot of variables in the question in terms of depending on kind of this stage of life you're in. You know, if you are a young, mobile, sort of single teacher, I would say it is probably really straightforward. But, you know, if you have mortgages, obviously if you pay into pensions, there's a lot to consider. But the good thing is that international schools are experts at relocating teachers. You know, they actually have teams dedicated to sorting out all of these things for you. Or
the question there again from Karen: do employers pay for your flight? So I guess that's on successful appointment. But what about, maybe let's start with the interview process. Is that done remotely? Are the teams coming to the UK for interviews, or are they flying people over? How does it work?
It's a bit of a mix. I think since COVID, it's become a lot more online to save costs as well. But there are still, it's very common for heads or recruitment teams from international schools to come to the UK, where they'll arrange for sort of a mass interview weekend, meet all the candidates that they've shortlisted. I think, Amy, it still does happen where a school will fly candidates out to do interviews, but not as common as I think it used to be.
Yeah, I've got a couple of schools in Germany that would do that, but usually it would be an online interview. The only time that it wouldn't be is if the schools have recruitment fairs in the UK. But yeah, it's usually an online interview, a couple of stages meeting different people. Some schools might need you to teach a lesson online or record a lesson, but usually definitely interviews online with the SLT.
Yeah.
So let's say I get the job. Sorry, Reese. And this question for Karen here, just to help her. What's the deal? You know, you get your contract. I get my flights. Do I get an annual flight back? That kind of stuff. What are the kind of general things that you see and hear from schools that they offer?
So in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, they will pay for the initial and end of contract flights and annual flights. And the teachers will, I mean, obviously it varies from school to school, but usually they would get a cash allowance each year around Easter time, and they can use it as how they want. So it would be, if you're from the UK living in Dubai, the flight allowance would be the cost of a flight at that time of year, Dubai to UK, UK to Dubai. If they want to use it to go on holiday to Thailand or somewhere different, then they can. In schools in Europe, no.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
And any reason why, or is it just a particular preference to the region?
There could be. I said that, and then I think actually there could be a couple that do that. If they're watching, thinking, "Oh, well, we do," there could be a couple that maybe do. I think, especially people are coming to the UK, coming from the UK. I guess it's far cheaper to get from the UK to Spain. It's far quicker, which is why I think really that they do it further afield, but not closer to the UK, bringing teachers out from the UK.
Sure. Reese, any other thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, it's on relocating or the flights.
I guess just, you know, the difficulties that people might face with relocation, family, getting set up with house, health insurance, those kind of things.
And that's, again, as Amy said, in most Middle East, Asia destinations, definitely there is a lot of support around flights, travel, accommodation, and insurance. Often, one of the key questions you'll see in any application for any of those international schools in those locations will be around family members. Are you traveling with family? How many dependents do you have?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of schools will offer a subsidized placement for one child. That's quite common as well. So in that school. So again, you get sort of benefits for your own child's education if traveling with a family. So like I said, it's in the school's interest to make all this as easy and seamless for the candidate as possible, because otherwise, if it is difficult and unattractive, then people won't want to travel and leave their country to go to the school. So the schools are very good at it. And, it varies, but, we've got some schools that, they'll make sure all the new teachers are on the same flight. They'll meet each other at the airport. They'll all get on a bus at the other end. They'll travel to the school. They basically get, treated like royalty, when it comes to getting that first experience, positive experience.
That's certainly the things I've seen in my travels, and the people that move over to the school, they tend to have a good week or two induction. As a kind of general rule of thumb, I see on my travels. Okay, let's pop over to myth number 4. A reminder to everybody watching, so we've got a very large crowd watching now, which is great. So if you're watching either on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, you can leave a comment in the chat box and we'll filter through all the comments. We've got a lot of commentary going through and we'll put your questions on the screen. So here's myth number 4 that we'd like to try and bust. Is it seasonal, and what about the permanent nature of it all? So Amy, over to you. Is it seasonal?
So when teachers move internationally, they obviously get a 2-year contract usually. And I think for example, in the UK, you'll get given a permanent contract. So that it does worry people that they're going to feel that it's not permanent because they're not getting a permanent contract as such. But it's just because it's how the visas work abroad in a lot of places. So you would get a 2-year contract, and halfway through the second year, all the teachers are asked to say whether they're staying or leaving that school or that contract, and they sign to stay on for another year. And if it's working for them in the school, the same in any school in the UK, then they would just keep signing on each year. So it could be a 10-year contract if they wanted it to be, if that makes sense. Yeah,
no, it's totally what I see on my travels. I've met many British teachers who first qualified and have been teaching 20, 30 years overseas for their entire career, and they're just popping back to the UK every year or every other year just to catch up with friends and family. What about any kind of contractual things to consider for people? So anything they should look out for, or kind of some horror stories, or any top tips for people when looking through contracts?
I think they want it to be a 2-year contract, really. Mm-hmm. Some of them have started doing unlimited,
right,
which I feel people will look at that and think that's more permanent, but actually it does mean that they could be let go whenever, throughout the year or something. Whereas with the 2-year contract, it's a lot more common to be looking for that.
I guess it's security for the member of staff as well as for the school, and that renewal process too.
Yeah. In terms of anything else in the contract, I think it does depend on the region as to what's going to be offered and what's in there. But, they are going to be very similar. With the probation period will be in there. They want to see, want to make sure that there's no costs involved that they're unaware of. If they were to leave, or they needed to leave for whatever reason, make sure that there's no cost implications of them leaving.
I guess there's the other thing. When I've worked with teachers in South America, their academic year is March to something like another time of year. So there's obviously different months of the year, which, again, the rhythm of the academic year, that is, seasonal, I suppose, but those contracts make your role permanent. What's the academic year in Australia? It's December to January, isn't it? Or have I got these mixed up?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't recruit. I've never recruited in Australia, and I didn't recruit when I lived there. But yeah, I think they're January to December, because I do recruit for an Australian school in Malaysia, and their calendar year is January to December.
Sure, Reece.
Yeah, it's that in for Australian schools, and Australian curriculum schools often follow that as well. It's the contractual bits, looking for basically just making sure that, if you are looking to leave, you adhere to those contract terms as well, because again, it's not like you can get in trouble for it, but reputationally, you don't want to burn any bridges. You want to make sure that you leave on positive notes and you don't cause an inconvenience for the schools, because again, they have to invest a lot for themselves in international teachers. So the best thing is to do is understand the
one word of caution I would give all viewers. So I've been teaching 33 years, and there I was in my little bubble teaching in London, 350 schools, one of the largest school economies in the world. However, quite a small network when you start to work in the same place. But then when you go on your travels, you realize people know each other, and there's the social media footprints as too. And then when you start to visit schools internationally, you see people in the same places or people that know different people. And we'll talk about the Fabicia event later, Reece, won't we, about the Far East British School Network. Again, another interesting, brilliant community of teachers and schools over there. But again, that word, the caution that you made, be aware that head teachers do talk, schools do talk to each other, and we have to look after our professional reputation too. Amy, any other thoughts before we move on to myth number 5?
I don't think so. I think we've covered everything with that one.
I've got one actually to add, Ross, on that. In terms of, I think there is sometimes confusion around when we talk around international teaching. There's people perceive it as being, I'm going to teach probably English or teach another language to local children in country and stuff like that. And then there's obviously international teaching, where it's curriculum-based education, very similar to, in your country of origin, math, science, subject teaching in international schools. And that is, more permanent. Whereas English teaching or TESOL, that can be quite seasonal. That can be sort of much shorter term contracts here and there, not to diminish either one. But I sometimes think when people think about teaching abroad, it maybe people lean towards, I'm going to go teach English or teach another language rather than
our international audience. Can I just get you to clarify your TEFLs and TESOLs?
So you're testing me now.
You're on the spot. Teaching as an English foreign language.
Teaching English as a foreign language, and TESOL teaching second language, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Amy, you've seen this question on the or this comment from Natasha on the screen. Any advice here for leadership applications?
I think the salaries in general, it's a difficult one, because it really does depend on the location, I think, more than anything, because it's going to be in line with the living costs. So if you are unsure about if you're looking at a country that you've never been to before and you don't know about the living costs, and you're unsure about what salary you would want there, I think if you have commitments back home and you need a certain amount of money per month to send back home, and you know what salary you need, then obviously you could share. But if you actually don't know, then it's something that try and avoid until the interview, until you actually can find out, and try and get them to say, if you really don't know and you don't know what you need, then try and get them to advise a bit more, because it's not necessarily just up to you to come up with that, because you don't know the area, if that makes sense.
And I'm sure there's a bit of a footprint online where people can do a bit of a search and things like that. I'm reminded my last leadership role when I left, quite a very healthy figure as a senior leader for 20 odd years in London, and then I went to work in a school and Switzerland, and the cost of living there and salary is almost double. So I looked at the colleagues that were working doing my role over in Switzerland, and I think one or two colleagues were on 150, 160,000 pounds. However, if I fill my car up with petrol and buy a can of Coke, it might cost me £500, whereas in the UK something like that might just cost 100. So costs of living are proportionate, salaries are proportionate. So that's a really good tip from Amy there for you, Natasha, to look at the cost of living and day-to-day expenses that
because I took something like a 20 grand pay cut to move from Australia to Prague. Didn't really think anything of it at the time, but the living costs were nothing. And I visited Cairo 2 weeks ago, and I could not believe that it cost me £1.50 to get an Uber for 25 minutes, and it cost me £2 to go for breakfast. It was mental. Wow. And they were laughing at me because they said, yeah, she's coming over from Dubai, so she thinks it's expensive. She thinks it's cheap, but it's really expensive. They thought that it was. So it really does. It differs depending on where you are.
Reese, any comments here from Natasha before we move on to our next myth?
No, nothing about that. I think Amy's recommendation is spot on. Do a bit of research, but I don't think you need to worry about setting your expectation. Find out what the role is offering. They will have their budgeted salary for leaders. So
I'll say good. So good luck with that one, Natasha. Right, let's go to myth number 5. I guess an important one in the dialogue of teacher mental health and well-being. When I first started to explore teacher well-being 10 years ago, there was no research, emerging research coming out, but now it's a conversation we all have on our lips. And I guess the point you made earlier, Reese, is the world's much smaller now, and we can get somewhere on a flight, and we can have those flights kind of compensated, I suppose, in some of the jobs that we secure. So what are your immediate thoughts here about people that you've met? And, particularly if you're maybe young, no family commitments, and you're moving overseas for the first time?
Yeah. My personal experience of visiting countries to visit schools, and I know a lot of international teachers all over the world, and I've never met a community like it. When you go to these places, the sort of expat teaching community is really strong. They will, like I mentioned before, around how the schools kind of facilitate this by making sure you are very much intertwined in the community really early doors. Often where the accommodation is, you're not just dotted around the city on your own. You're in, actually, I say the word compound. It sounds a little bit rough, but you're in these residential communities.
I'll give you an interesting story that I've sometimes found in lots of different international settings, where you can be socializing with your colleagues, but also teaching their children. So something, although we're talking about isolation here, what if you've got to tell Reese off, and I'm having I'm socializing with Amy, and I've got, you've got all those other things to consider. So you get that in any school. You can get that here in the UK. You can be working in a small village and be socializing with people in down the high street and teaching their kids. So it's just like you get that anywhere. But I guess in that international circuit, it might be a little bit more heightened, such things like that. Amy, what are your thoughts on teacher well-being, things like that, when moving abroad?
I think from my experience, it has just honestly been incredible. Now, I moved and didn't know anybody in this city. I'd never been, didn't know anybody. I was not joining a huge office like teachers will join a huge school, so I didn't have a big group of people that I was going to be with. And honestly, within the first week of me living here, my friendship group was bigger than it's ever been before. And it's just, you instantly are surrounded by people that you have things in common with. And that's people are moving abroad on their own and want to meet people and want to do things. They want to see the country, they want to explore. And everybody's just, it's like Reese was saying, it's such an expat community.
Yeah, you find your like-minded kind of souls, don't you?
Yeah, and it's just, and I think, so that's me moving all by myself and not knowing anybody. But then the teachers...
Further, Amy, sorry to interject. what kind of mechanisms have you used? So if you joined a small office, is it Facebook groups or WhatsApp, or how have you built those friendship networks, not knowing anybody?
So when I first moved, I chose to live with somebody. I chose to live with a girl from Sheffield who I didn't know, but I thought that would be a great way to meet people, and I did, and I was out with her friends. I've lived on my own for a number of years now, but that was sort of to get to meet people. But also, I've got a lot of friends who are teachers who I've spoke to through my job. I've also posted in, so I'm in the expat Facebook groups, and I've posted in, saying, hey girls, is anybody in here who would want to meet up or meet for coffee? And straight away, people say, yeah, I would love that. And it gets a bit overwhelming because you think, oh my God, I haven't got time to meet all these people. But it's just, and actually one quick story that I tell people, and I just think it's funny. During COVID, in Dubai, all of a sudden we all had to stay in our apartments and we couldn't leave.
Yes.
When they'd announced it. And I was cooking dinner that night, and I had all the ingredients apart from an onion. And this is no word of a lie. And I thought, I can't eat pasta without an onion. I posted in this group, this Facebook group for the building that I was in. And I said, I know this sounds a bit mental, but does anybody in this building have a spare onion? And honestly, the influx of messages that I had of people, and I kept saying to people, I've already got one now,
How many onions did you end up with?
Well, I got one. I only accepted one, but so many people were wanting to come and just to at least socialize with people. I'll come down and give you one. And that was in my first few months here, and I just thought,
another question, any major differences between Prague, Australia and Dubai in terms of that friendship network you built? Was there a different cultural ways of doing things, or was it pretty straightforward?
Cultural differences, yeah. Friendship groups, no. Same amazing experiences. When I was in Prague, I joined a huge company, so there was loads of people that I instantly, I was best friends, and my family were the group that I worked with, which is what I think teachers get moving abroad. They are in that scenario. But Australia and Dubai, is English speaking country, so very easy. Whereas Prague, obviously not so much, because European, understandable. So I wasn't sure if that was going to be a bit of an issue, but it wasn't. I had an English speaking doctor, and nothing that I thought, oh my God, this is terrible. Nothing in that sense at all.
That's reassurance. I hope people watching here listen to Amy's story, who's tried and tested, very experienced, living all over the place. Lots of friends. So we're having pasta at yours, Amy, next time I come over to Dubai.
I'll make sure I have an onion.
Reese, thoughts on stories that you've heard in terms of maybe the good, the bad, and the ugly, if possible? I don't know if you've got any stories.
Yeah, and I think I was really thinking that we need to be careful about saying international teaching everywhere is great. You won't feel isolated anywhere, because there are some very popular destinations where there's big expat communities, but there's international schools on every continent, in every country, and they're not all the same. And I think it's very important to try and do your research before you go somewhere, because you don't want to find yourself in somewhere that, if you are a very extroverted person, you really want to be outgoing and meet people, etc. And if there isn't that sort of tight-knit community, or there isn't access to that, you can do that by, particularly if you're into an interview process, you can possibly ask if you can talk to one of the other staff members, not so much the hiring, the interviewers, because you want an unbiased, neutral position, but maybe see if you can talk to people at the school and just ask them what it's like, get a real sort of personal feel for their experiences around community and isolation. And at schools, international schools, those that are recognized, leading international schools, and a good thing to look out for is the associations they belong to, because even these are a sense of community. So around the world, regionally, you'll have groups like the British Schools in the Middle East, which is known as BSME. You'll have Federation of British International Schools in Asia, which is FOBISIA. They all acronyms. But we'll maybe share some, circulate those in some way.
to share.
But they first, sorry.
You go. I'm interrupted.
So the first reason to look for those is those are standards of quality when it comes to looking at international schools, and they're the same for all curriculums, different curriculums, IB, etc. Looking for those when you're actually looking at a school is a great way to know that this is a highly reputable school, a really well-respected institution, etc. It's passed inspections in order to get its status, but being associated with those organizations gives access to often conferences, subject-specific conferences, and online networks as well, online communities through those of teachers, not just in your city, but within your location, your region. So yeah, looking for the organizations, associations is an important one.
Another top tip. Amy, I'm going to bring you in one last time. I guess if you think about maybe one or two colleagues that have maybe not had a good time internationally and that mental health, well-being, isolation, any words of advice to avoid that happening, where you might start to see the reading on the wall? And I'm sure there's lots of scenarios where you might face a bereavement or you need to return home for whatever reason. Any words of advice here, Amy, in terms of how to maybe spot the signs, or Reece mentioned some local networks.
I think a bit like what Reece was saying, and I think ask as many people as you can and speak to as many people as you can. Do read reviews online, because you can do that. And it's hard when reading reviews, because some people could speak negatively about a school in particular, and then others might have a fantastic time. But if you're seeing a school that has there's a lot of, or a situation where there's a lot of negativity, then just be mindful of that, I suppose.
Yeah. And doing so through socials and those local groups and networks, and talking to different people would be some good bits of advice. Now,
yeah, and I think LinkedIn is great as well, because you're always going to find teachers in, if you're looking at a school in particular, you're going to find teachers on LinkedIn that work at that school. So why not reach out and say, hey, I'm looking at your school, and chat to people?
Yeah, that is, and I would recommend LinkedIn of all places as the best place to do that. Now, I've got a couple of questions that we're going to come to in a moment. Harry, you'll be pleased to know, and we're about to mention a recruitment fair, and here we're also going to talk about what you should do next. So before you do, I've just got a couple of, let me just move this message out of the way. I'm just going to show my website again. So just for people that might be interested, in the search bar at the top, if you type teaching and learning in and press that search bar at the top, so this is on teachertoolkit.co.uk, you'll see that I've written a blog about all the places that I have visited. Part of what I do in my research and presentations with schools is look at the teaching workforce, not necessarily the pay and conditions and things like that, but generally the state of the nation, how British teachers are working and teaching overseas, and my experiences and what I've been asked to do. So you might find some of these blogs of interest based on some of the places that I've been. So I'll just pop that link in the chat box. You won't be able to click it, sadly, but at least you can see it on the video if you watch this back in the recording later. So this video is already live. You can watch everything back, get all the comments. Here is the comment here on the chat box. There, I'll just take this off the screen and come to this slide here. And Reece, you are going to tell me what is happening in the end of the month.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. So very well-timed question earlier about, are there any fairs? There are plenty of fairs, and fairs are probably a newer form of sort of recruitment tool in a way. We don't do any physical fairs because, again, we find there can be a bit of a meat market. Apologies for the crude phrase there, but you sort of funnel down a corridor to meet as many schools as possible, and it's quite intense. We are hosting and actually probably one of the largest that's ever been done, a online virtual recruitment fair specifically in partnership with FOBISIA. Now, this is the Federation of British International Schools in Asia. So there will be over 70 top-tier British international schools live online on the 30th of November between the hours of, I think, 7 and 12 British time, GMT. And it's an amazing opportunity to not come and find a job. You know, it's not all about you need to interview, you need to think. It's really about find information about the diversity of locations within Asia and those schools within them as well. Being able to talk directly to the schools, ask your questions directly, watch videos, see what opportunities they have, and then ultimately arrange, if you are interested in taking it further, arrange for interviews, etc. at a later date. Or,
so, Reece, what's the time? Sorry, the 30th of November, is it an all-day event? People scan this QR code?
It's morning. It's, again, depending on your time zone. Okay. Obviously, you are welcome to join it from wherever in the world. It's not just for British candidates, but times that I know in my head are 7 a.m. UK time till about midday. So it's
see in the chat 7 till 1. Yeah,
7 till 1.
You say for FOBISIA, I say FOBISIA. You said it for FOBISIA, don't you?
FOBISIA, yeah.
One thing we can agree on is they're a fantastic organisation. I've had the privilege of attending one of their leadership conferences and teaching and learning conferences in St Christopher's Island in Penang, of all places. And it was fantastic. And I met a good 200 or 300 teachers from across the region, from Japan to Brunei and all sorts of places. And I have some brilliant memories of that event. So you're in safe hands with FOBISIA. Amy, if I come to you, tell us more about your contact details and this QR code. Where's that going to take people?
With this QR code, I'm not quite sure, Reece. Is that being put on there? I can take that bit. Okay. Yeah, the QR. Shall I just cover this bit as well?
Yeah,
go on then. So yeah, eTeach as well. We're doing at the virtual fair, as I mentioned. That is not all we do. We host one of the largest job platforms on the planet for specifically focused at connecting educators and professional staff as well, not just academic teachers, but with schools all over the world, in the UK and globally as well. So if you do want to view jobs directly, you can see live opportunities today and apply for them yourself. You can create a free account by scanning the QR code there. If, again, you're a busy teacher and you don't have enough time to apply for jobs and you just need a bit of a helping hand, Amy, who's been on the call with us, her contact details were there, and she can do the heavy lifting and connect you with some great opportunities as well.
I think on that note, heavy lifting, I think it's past midnight for Amy now. So we need to, Amy, I need to give you a sincere thank you for staying up late and sharing all your expertise with everyone. Before I let you go, though, could you both take a moment? So everyone in the chat box, your last chance to leave a quick question that I might just mop up and deal with on my own. But before I let you both go, could you tell me some interesting places you've been with on your travels with eTeach, and some obscure places that British teachers might not consider teaching? What are some interesting places, Amy, that you've been to and also allocated jobs to?
Well, I recently went to Cairo, so that was a brilliant trip. And so this year I've just been to Qatar and Cairo, which has been great.
Nice.
In terms of placing teachers, I have placed teachers on the Ascension Island, which a lot of people don't know where that is or that it even exists actually until I've placed people there. It is in the middle of the ocean, but it's a fantastic little island.
In South America and Africa, if I'm right.
Yeah, and there's the St. Helena Island as well, which people don't necessarily know about.
And Reece, how about you?
So I would say that.
Where have you been with eTeach that's been very interesting?
Where haven't I been? It's probably more pertinent. So Japan, I think, was really interesting, meeting with the British School of Tokyo. And there's been a lot of schools, international schools, opening up in Japan recently. That that was a fascinating place culturally, and just looked like an amazing place to be a teacher. But also South Korea as well, island of Jeju. We're working with a fantastic school group at the moment that have a site there, as well as Japan. Actually, they've sort of really got a
any interesting job assignments that you've allocated people to? Any interesting obscure places?
It wasn't even the Shetland Islands. It was even further up. There's this tiny school either on the Orkney Islands, and it was getting a bit of publicity because it had gone on so long that they hadn't found their teacher, and we ended up sending them 2 or 3 options, and they hired someone for that role eventually. Right. But yeah, that's probably the weirdest one.
So thank you both for your time and expertise. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. There's still a lot of people watching live, so it's a very popular and juicy topic. Sabrina, your question here, and unless I'm wrong, Amy or Reese, I suppose the answer is yes, it's easy to transfer with that kind of context. And I've got another question here from Liam. Any tips on how to stand out in application process? Well, I would imagine that's pretty much like most job applications. It can be a competitive market, as Amy mentioned earlier, for specific subjects internationally. I guess always my leadership experience, check the job description, candidate specification, play to your strengths, and make sure you play to the school's needs would be another top tip for me. I'll do another couple of ones.
If I just jump on a little bit on that one as well. If you are possibly applying, it all depends on where and the location, but working with a recruitment expert like Amy, for example, can help you potentially cut the queue in the sense, in terms of Amy's got great relationships with the hiring teams, the heads. You know, she is able to have conversations about your application that on your own, you won't be able to speak for yourself in that sense. So working with a professional like Amy, if you do feel like you are struggling to get that foot in the door, could be helpful.
Great, fantastic. And then this last one here. Amy, is this an issue for this person? International schools are expected to teach all subjects in primary?
They have specialists. So I've got a primary music teaching job in Abu Dhabi at the minute, for example, and they'll have primary PE teaching jobs. Great.
So there's going to be lots more questions coming in. Thank you, Amy and Reese, for clarification. There is Amy's contact details if you need to send her an email address. And one last plug on this QR code, join this recruitment fair. It's free to attend, 7 a.m. GMT until 1 p.m. GMT on the 30th of November 2024. Any questions? ross@teachertoolkit.co.uk. Thank you, Reese and Amy, for joining me. Thank you for your expertise. I'm going to start to say my goodbyes. Last chance to leave comments in the chat box, everybody. Otherwise, Reese, Amy, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
So that's it, everyone. It's a big world out there. There are 32,000 schools across the UK and internationally, even more. In fact, one interesting place I visited was China, the largest education system in the world. And you'll find a British school in almost every country in the world. So there's that QR code. I'm going to leave that play. I'm going to disappear behind the scenes. Can I wish you here from the UK a very good evening. Take care. And I'll see you soon. Bye for now.